Hello, everyone. Thank you for being back with us. This is WTF Walk the Floors, all things hospitality training. I'm Michele Kline with Kline Hospitality, and I'm here with my co hostess, Stephanie Leger with First Rate Hospitality. Stephanie, how are you today?
Very well. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's starting to feel cold in my neck of the woods, and I'm excited. We've seen some snowfalls. So, super awesome winter ahead of us. How about you
Oh,
on that
yes.
side?
Oh, well, we're in our own little bubble, still in the 80s, although in a few days going to dip down into the low 60s or
And that's where
low 70s, high
no one
60s.
knows what to do, right?
Yeah.
Hotels are not
uh,
prepared for that. We have no blankets. People are freaking out. It's so cold.
yes. I mean, I even remember when I would be serving at the beach restaurant and be at the beginning of setting up shift and then wearing gloves.
That's awesome.
and Yeah, but definitely it's our busy time here. This is now the kickoff with snow starting to fall in the different areas. People now are wanting to travel, get out of it already, and so it's been a pretty busy time here in Miami.
So some people run towards the beach and other people
Yeah.
run towards the mountain. I am the latter. So let's talk about today's topic. What is that
Yes,
going to be?
yes. So let's talk about influencing in the industry and how we get our information as well to seeing what's going on out in the industry in the different parts of the world, in the country, and also too in the different departments.
And we can say that the way we are influenced today, or the way we retrieve best practices, trends, what's going on, who knows what, who's doing what, is very different than the way you and I got it when we first started our career.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much now technology and different platforms to being able to receive different information of what's going on and relatable, whether it be for your department or for your city or for your type of hotel. Where before, I mean, the technology really didn't exist and you really relied on talking to other individuals that were in your property that came from a different property, to being able to compare what was going on elsewhere outside of your property.
Absolutely. I think that 2020 accelerated that exposure, right? Now you have access to webinars and you have access to people literally on social media giving out best practices, sharing like this podcast, right? What is it something that you can relate to, or perhaps take us back down memory lane and walk us through how is that you used to look for that inspiration, or that those best practices, or what did that look like to you when you first started?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was very privileged that working at one of the flagship properties for a very luxury brand. And so we even had one of the founders resided at our property. So it was really honored to being able to seeing where his vision was when he started the company. And then also too, seeing how it was evolving even back 20 years ago and getting changing with the times. But then also too, we were the guinea pigs in a lot of things that would become going out into the brand to the other properties. So it was just really those moments of like just staring and being like, wow, this is awesome, that to being part of it. And then it wasn't until I moved to New York that I really, now looking back at it, it was like, wow, that was such an amazing experience that not everyone gets to experience that. And then going to New York, and then now you're on the receiving end, waiting for corporate to say, okay, this is what we're going to do, or this is how we're going to change things. So it was very, very differently, but it was pretty awesome, growing up in the industry of having such of like the forefathers of the hotels industry right there on property.
So interesting. And like I was saying before, we didn't have webinars, we didn't have the exposure of people really volunteering so much information on social media like we do today. And I remember two things. One was the my interest in seeking that information, not only by mingling with other professionals within the industry in the same city. I granted at the beginning of my career I was in a very small town, so we only had like maybe three or four of the bigger hotels in the area. So getting to network with them was extremely important to me. The other thing was coming across virtual or either digital or paper magazines that were
Mhm.
well recognized in the industry in order to get those trends, to get those best practices, and see who's up for doing what, right? I remember those things being extremely important on my end. But then the other thing that I think it's important, and I think you and I have discussed this in the past too, which is the fact of how you may be at the same property for many, many years. So,
Mhm.
what happens when you're stuck in the same building for so long and you're not seeking to understand what the outside world is doing, right? So, when you have that opportunity to go out there and go to openings, I've always encouraged my leaders to go out and do openings because you get
Mhm.
exposure to other markets and then you're like, wow, this is so different, right?
Absolutely. And even also too, at a property that I was at is, encouraging to go and visit the other properties, especially the ones that are in your comp set, to being able to network as well. We're all in the industry, we're all trying to promote tourism, but then also too of seeing what their steps of service and how they react and observing to different scenarios with the guest or the amenities that they are offering. And so it's always a great way for team bonding too, and going out there and visiting. Don't wait for the information to come to you. Go out there and seek it and find a way how you can be able to seek it.
Absolutely. How do you think, Stephanie, some of these new ways of spreading the word could hinder an operation or could hurt a leader?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one is we're seeing like on TikTok, even just servers, like line staff are out there and they're talking about, steps of service, or this is how you're able to pronounce certain Italian words if they're on your menu. But then also too, a lot of times then they try to be funny, or they're making fun of a typical scenario, and then now the guests are seeing that, and that could also too have a bad influence as well, to now being seen, oh well, they're just making fun of this scenario, or they're not taking it serious of what should be done on steps of service. So I think that can really hurt, and we're seeing it too because then the person posts it and then you find out through research exactly what property they were at, and now next thing you know they're in HR having to talk about what they're putting out there on social media.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Team members sometimes don't realize that you are representing your brand at all
Yeah.
times. Yeah. Misinformation, I think, is so critical. So critical. Like you were saying, you have a server explaining steps of service, and in reality, there's X, Y, and Z that was missed, or that server has not been trained in high-end surveys, for example. And now you have someone seeking that type of information or knowledge, and it hasn't been defined the right way, and that's most definitely hindering the opportunity to learn things the right way.
Absolutely. But then also too on the positive side here is, now we're able to hear how steps of service is being done internationally, say over in Europe or down in the Caribbean. It's kind of cool being able to seeing how, especially coming out of COVID and tourism coming back into these different pockets and seeing what they're doing and hearing from them, as well of talking about guest experience or steps of service.
Yes. And then the other thing is there is so much information out there that if you're not careful or knowledgeable enough as to who those people that are influencing that do have that knowledge because they have that wisdom, that experience, years under their belt, exposure to different brands, to different markets, then it's hard to differentiate the good and the bad in a sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I would say, to our listeners, when you're starting to see a new person that's coming out or coming across your articles that you're reading or YouTube videos that you're watching, really do the research as well to seeing have they written other articles, have they been on other podcasts or what's their background as well to seeing how it's relatable to you, for us coming up with in the housekeeping, with our background being there, that we really can be relatable to a lot of the housekeeping directors and even supervisors and room attendants because we've been there and we know what that is like on the day to day, but then also too of how we've been able to enhance our team to getting the job done for the guest.
That's a great point. So mainly looking for specific examples, right?
Yeah.
I think that anyone in HR who's on the other side, who's done or who's behind interviewing or training their own people how to interview, that's one of the things that we always look for, is to ask very specific questions related to the job so that you know that the person on the other side has that experience that you're looking for. So I think that it kind of applies in this case as well.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
for you, Michelle, I mean, how are you now since like technology is so involved from just waiting for articles to be published in magazines, how are you going out there and seeing what's going on or who are you following as well?
So it's interesting. I am old enough now where I am the one who's
Mhm.
writing those articles. So I don't know if that's great or it's just like, oh man. But yes, there is a selective group of people that I like to see what they are doing. And then on the
Mhm.
other hand, I would say most definitely the bigger brands. I like knowing
Yes.
what they're doing, what they're posting. How are they portraying their own image? I think that's important to me. It speaks loud about their culture and their strategy. And then on the other hand, following the operating officers and the executive officers from those brands as well. Again, to see how it is that they are speaking, what's their voice like, and what it is that their interests look like, and where is the brand going specifically.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And also too is just getting a well-rounded information as well. So between YouTube and articles and LinkedIn and following brands, even on the social media, um, to then being able to taking all of this information and coming out with your own thoughts about what's being said. Some things about sustainability that's coming out. It's a big trend, and not even a trend, it's really the future of how we need to look into our guest experience and operating costs as well. But then you have some brands that there I'm trying to think of an example of of really the balloons at and fireworks and all of these things of the extravaganza parties, but then also too that really is hindering the environment as well. And so, I think that's what we're going to be seeing is, you know, you hear one thing, but then you see other things that are happening.
Quite interesting, especially because the guest that is coming, right? The generation that is coming, that we're starting to see walk in those doors, is very much in tune with what is your brand doing from a sustainable perspective. So
Hmm.
you're trying to perhaps do something super over the top for New Year's Eve, for example, and then there's a question behind it. That's very interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And the consistency. I mean, I get it, us as brands and providing guest experience, we're always trying to see, okay, is this going to, stick? You throw everything out to the wall and see what sticks. And so, we're going to try this. Okay, this wasn't great. So now let's try something else to see. And how is this attracting guests? Or how is this bringing up our guest engagement scores as well?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just
The
always
other thing
evolving.
from the from the social media perspective that I can say is I'm a huge believer in collaboration. Always have been,
Mhm.
right? There's a reason why this synergy actually happened. And there, with the exposure that, for example, LinkedIn, right? Everyone knows that LinkedIn is my place. I'm not sure I'm very excited about the other platforms, but definitely LinkedIn, I feel it's still very business oriented, very professional, and people are there for the most part for the same reasons. And being able to see the way other professionals think through their posts and being able to connect with those people and perhaps pick their brain. I saw that you posted about this. I'd love to talk to you about it, right? And create those synergies where, again, you are potentially sharing best practices, understanding new trends, or what it is that is coming. And not necessarily that has to come from the marketing department of a brand or anyone in a C-suite type of position, but it can also come from someone who is in the trenches, and
Yeah.
they probably speak in the same way that you like to hear it, and that's where the connection happens.
Absolutely. And adding on to that, I think what we're going to start hearing more is the ecosystem, is that here we are providing information to one another, we're collaborating with one another, and we're expanding it out to both of our connections as well, and new people that are coming into the industry or even coming back into the industry. And then it just gets bigger and bigger, which is great. And so I really think that word ecosystem is what we'll hear more and more about with collaborating and influence or providing influencing information.
I love that, and I'd like to leave it at that ecosystem. And let's plan on one episode where maybe we can have a few professionals come on, and we'll talk about that. Sounds great.
Yes, wonderful. Well, thanks again, everyone, and our listeners. And we'll talk to you or see you next time.
See you next time.